All right, we're live.
Yay! A party ain't a party ain't a party.
That's right. Well, here we are. For those of you who are tuning in, my name is Peter Rubin. I'm here with Nancy Moricette. What are we drinking today?
So I am drinking Bubbly, free advertising. They have those really cute commercials with Michael Bublé.
Ooh, nice. And I'm having tea. It's Greek mountain tea. It's something I just discovered.
Greek mountain tea. Okay.
So anyway, we are here today to have a deep conversation about moving from moment to movement. Mm-hmm. This is some language that you shared with me in an email and just exploded my brain. It just seems so timely. So to give context, I'm Peter Rubin. I'm one of the co-founders of the Racial Reconciliation Project. And we are cooking up an intensive for white people starting really soon, August 8th. And it's a 3-week journey of healing and action that I'm co-leading with Galen Logan and Wanda Whitaker, 2 incredible Black facilitators. And in preparation for this workshop series, we've been interviewing different guest experts. Nancy is our guest expert today.
Yeah.
Yay. And Nancy is a diversity, equity, and inclusion expert and has various facets to her work. She does work in organizations, in companies, does community projects, which I actually want to ask you about as well, because they look really cool.
That's what's up.
Nancy has a master's in education from Bank Street College in New York. And I actually want to read a little bit from your website, something that stood out to me.
Do it.
Yeah, I love your website. It's simple and it's...
That's me.
Powerful.
No frills.
Yeah, just... So anyway, your brand, which I love, is Ase Power Consult.
That's right.
Again, right to the point. And here's some words you wrote that I just want to share with our listeners here. I founded Ase Power Consult to provide organizations with the tools necessary to build bridges across racial, economic, religious, and cultural divides. The foundation of my consulting practice is grounded in the West African Yoruba philosophy of Ase. Ase is the manifested power to create and produce change through language. People can manifest wondrous environments with words or allow their words to dissolve communities by fostering destructive practices. Mm-hmm. Through using Ase as a foundation, I challenge organizations to interrogate collective and individual perceptions in order to develop authentic connections with diverse community stakeholders.
That's right.
I read that and I was like, yes!
That is right.
Yeah, and what a time to be doing this work, right? You've been doing this for a while. You've done a lot of formal training, training in diversity and inclusion, and you're up to some big stuff. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I'm excited to talk with you and learn from you.
Thank you.
And just as we dive in, how are you feeling in this collective moment?
I guess I get asked, Ase, thank you, Peter. I get asked this question a lot. How are you feeling? How are you doing? When Brother Floyd was taken away from us through murderous intent and action, I had all of my non-Black friends texting me saying, "Are you okay? Is everything all right?" And I found that really triggering because I'm like, I could have asked me a month ago if I was okay, or a year ago if I was okay. But there's this racial reckoning that's happening right now in our society, which is, I love that word reckoning because it happens whether or not you want it to or not. Where it can either lead some to move towards reconciliation and reach out to someone like myself or someone who looks like myself and say, can we just check in? Because I feel like I've known about racial injustice or systemic injustice for years, but I just never really had to do anything about it. I never had to sit in place for 3 or 4 months and really think about how my actions or lack thereof impacted everyone around me. So when people ask me how I'm feeling, I say, I feel ready. I've been ready since I started this work almost 20 years ago. I feel ready. How do you feel? You know, I'm in it. I've been in it for a while, and I'm not in it to win it because, you know, Martin Luther King said, you know, that I'm going to misquote this, but about, you know, not necessarily being able to make it up to the mountaintop to see his dream fulfilled, but he knew that the work that he was doing was having such an impact. That was enough, wasn't as enough, right? My commitment, is to impact people through my Ase power in a way that allows them to tap into the recognition that they have power based on the color of their skin, based on their gender. If they're part of a dominant group within their organization, like a cis male group or cis white male group, or even their identity, right? Based on whatever group you're in, that may have social dominance or institutional dominance within whatever collective you're in, right? So my commitment is to just get people to tap into the idea that our words carry weight based on what experience is we've had on this planet and how we use those experiences to do good or evil on this planet. What I identify as evil on this planet.
Yeah. Thank you. You know what I thought was a very simple question. How are you doing? Has layers of cultural context to it. Right. So thank you for sharing those layers. And I think I've been hearing something similar from my friends of color saying, look, this is not news to me. This has been going on my whole life.
Yes.
Right. So why are you checking in now? And then
yeah. And there's accountability in that. That's not to shame the person. This is the whole purpose of the word Ase is recognize what you're saying, Peter. Really listen to what you're saying. Why are you asking me? Okay. And why didn't you ask me a couple of years ago? Now commit to living in this moment and not working past it, saying this is why I'll call you, but working through it together with me, if I choose to be in that space with you. And if I don't, say Ase and, leave that space and then continue to work on it on your own. That's what I am asking for as a woman of color, as a first generation Haitian American. That is what I am asking for. That is what I'm requiring, what I've always required of the people who claim to be allies or accomplices or friends or lovers. This is what I require in order for you to be activated in my space.
You, right before we went on, you spoke to boundaries.
Yes!
And this sounds like a boundary. To be in my world, to be in my space, this is what I require. That's a very, clean and clear boundary.
Yes, boundaries are important.
Yeah, could you speak to your journey with boundaries and what you've been learning about holding those boundaries?
Yes, for sure. So again, I'm first generation. So I'm Haitian American, and I know that my parents, when I was coming up, I grew up in the Deep South. I grew up in South Florida. Please forgive me. And I grew up in a part of town called Little Haiti, Little Haiti. So I got to grow up around people who were from my culture, hear my own language, Haitian Creole spoken. And it gave me a little bit of an idea of safety, right? Until that safety bubble was popped in a really ferocious way. And I got to set my boundaries because that bubble got popped. But I'll say that my parents would always say, listen, you may have been born in this country, but you are a dark complexion Black woman and you're other because your last name is Moricette and you're Haitian, you're Haitian. The people that are here are going to look at you a certain way, are going to call. They were preparing me. I wish they didn't have to in third grade prepare me for the worst. Yeah. But thank God they did, because then I went out into the world and I got called names like porch monkey. I had people who are my Black brethren who had shared the same skin complexion impact me with words steeped in colorism and pain and hurt of, a colonial Southern past, right? Say, oh, you're too dark, you'll never get married, or, or back in the day, it was like, Haitians do voodoo and you eat cat, or we brought the virus over. So at the time, the pandemic was the HIV crises. That was originally blamed on members of the homosexual community, originally called gay-related immune deficiency syndrome, until it was corrected, but the damage was already done. And mind you, just a little bit of history on that. When it was called GRID, the virus was discovered in hemophiliacs from Haiti. So then they were like, okay, maybe it's not CDC, mind you, when I say they. And these articles are written in the New York Times, okay? So it's not like some offshoot newspaper saying gay people are responsible for the virus. It's the New York Times. Wow. So when the virus got discovered in Haitian hemophiliacs, it was like, okay, maybe it's immigrants. It's like, man, history repeats itself. Immigrants from other countries, you know, our president calling this the China flu. The virus is now people from Caribbean islands, and it was Haitian people. So Haitian people got, the damage was done. It got a lot of negative repercussions from that. So anywho, I digress a little. So my parents always said, you have to be your best when you walk out this house. You have to be triple time better than everyone else when you walk out this house. The pressure on a third grader, man, that was a lot, you know, you know, like the pressure. Yeah. So I always had to get the best grades. I always had to speak in the clearest, most articulated English language because I had accented Haitian Creole speech. Always, 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 always. And the pressure was just too much and unnecessary. And I realized around I remember the day, it was fourth grade. A teacher I had, Mrs. Burns, yes, I'm gonna call you out, kept making me retake my tests because I would get A's, and she just thought I was cheating, even though I sat in the front of the class. So I kept having to retake these tests, and I was like, I was about to curse. I was like, screw this, you know, boundaries. I don't have to. And my little fourth grade brain, I was like, I didn't even know what the word racist was at that point, but I knew what she was doing was wrong. So I remember one day I looked this chick in the eye and I was like, no, this is my grade. Take it or don't. I got sent to the principal's office, but I stood up, right? That was my boundary that day. She pushed me too far. I was like, no. Send me wherever you want to send me, but this is my grade, right? So I now have that for every aspect of my life. So when people are like, oh, Nancy, can you drop some dimes on this? Can you tell us about why America is a white supremacist nation? I say, here's a resource, read it, that's on you. And you're lucky that I'm giving you a resource because this is my calling. One of my callings is to be a facilitator and an educator, right? This is the calling on my life. But I pick and choose the framework in which I want to practice that calling. So it's not going to be at the dinner table at my boyfriend's house, because no, that's not my job to educate your racist parents, you know, or your homophobic parents, and I don't choose to make it my job. So those are my boundaries, but then there are boundaries within the confines of my own home. I turn on that TV set. If there is hate speech on that TV set, if you remember, within a 2 weeks post George Floyd, and how the cultural institution that is our media outlets were displaying how people were protesting the streets, looters, 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 looters. I'm like, this is another way that when we talk about that structural racism, that anti-Black racism bias that's in our cultural institutions. And I'm not talking about Fox News. I'm talking about CNN, NBC, Rowers. I'm talking about these stations focusing on the babies, because they were usually young, the 21 and under. Yes, going into the stores, they were doing that, but that wasn't 90% of the people out there, you know?
Yeah.
And that is a problem. And that didn't shift until we saw the collective power of all of the organizers in the streets, all of the protesters in the streets saying, oh, no, white dominant society controlling these media platforms. This will not be the narrative that will dominate our news system. And then we started seeing the narrative shift, you know? So that's also a way for me to reclaim my space. And as Miss Maxine Waters says, reclaiming my time. No, this is my boundary. You are not invited into my home with this trash. You know, I can choose what I welcome into my life.
Yeah, it's so inspiring to hear. I don't think boundaries are easy. I've struggled with boundaries for ages,
No,
and there's so much nuance to it. And it's something that's developed over years. And what I'm appreciating is you're so clear. and all these different boundaries, and it allows you to stay in this work in a sustainable way instead
That's
of
right.
getting, sort of cut down and your tank getting drained,
That's right.
which can happen all the time.
That's right.
So, and on the looting, it's interesting. I spoke with a Texan friend of mine in that same time period, and I said, so I was nervous to bring it up. I said, so what's coming up around all this, this anti-racist revolution? He says, I don't think people should be looting. So I heard him out and I said, what else? And that's all he had.
Yeah.
Because that's what the media was focusing on, and I think the conservative media even more focused on it. But
I would lean into it's not all he had. That was all he felt comfortable investing in. That's what I want to say.
yeah, fair enough.
I had a really good friend who is from the LGBTQ community. He's gay, he's of color. And I've been working in the trans community since I was a baby. Since I was like 16, I started working at the organization in Florida. And I remember I was talking to him about trans rights. This is maybe 8 years ago. And he was like, oh, I don't understand trans people. I'm like, and I just do tell. Because the assumption is, if you're of the queer community, if you're of a marginalized group, within a marginalized group, a BIPOC community within that group, then you can't be biased. That's not true.
Yeah.
But I lean in, I listen. And then again, boundary, I choose. This is the person I love, so I'm gonna lean in, just hear what you have to say. And he's like, I just don't understand trans people. Why can't they're making it so hard, as I heard it, for gay people, and I said, hey, can you break that down for me? And the person said, just be gay or be bi, but don't just stop. Don't change who you are. I'm like, yes, but let me push back again a little against that. Is that who that person not just identifies as, but as in indigenous native culture, there's this adoption of two-spirit. There are these two spirits that inside of me, and it could be a femme energy and a male energy, a masculine energy, and they both exist in harmony with each other. And physically, it may manifest as more feminine, or may manifest as more masculine, or neither. So my challenge to this person was to get to know some trans people, because what that person was comfortable with at that point was the conditioning that he had heard within the gay community, his comfort box. Fast forward, again, the cultural norm shifting because of representation. We now have RuPaul's Drag Race. We have Trixie. We have Trixie Mattel. We have all of these trans heroes or drag heroes. And everyone always says Laverne Cox, but they're amazing trans superheroes that are now in entertainment, that are getting more of a platform, particularly with Pose, that people are now welcoming into their living room when they release that boundary and they start watching that show, and it gives them another insight. And this very same person, who's no longer my friend, but someone I will always love, that's why I keep touching my heart. But that was a boundary. I just, like, people can sometimes be like tumors, and if you let them, they'll give you cancer. So I had to cut this person out because I wanted to live, damn it. But this person now, it's like they have selective memory of, so they were always a trans activist or an activist for trans rights. Wow. And I mentioned that because it's important for us to acknowledge where we were, so that we can then see clearer where we're going. Like, I am a biased person and I do this work for a living. I am biased as hell. There are days, it's why I work with my white accomplice so much, Ethan Kerr. There are days where I'm like, if I have to listen to another white woman talk about how bad she feels about racism, I'm going to bang my head against this wall. And so that I acknowledge what I'm feeling, but it also is also a switch in my brain. That is also part of my conditioning, where I just want to give up and give in to the narrative that is often preached in this country of No, we cannot get along. No, there, we cannot reach that. We will always be separate but equal in quotation marks, you know, because that's just the way it is. And that's a lie. That is not true,
Yeah.
you know. But it's easier from my perspective. I'm going to say a curse word. This is, I always say this to people. Sometimes people are just comfortable sitting in the shit that they know,
Yeah.
you know, even though it's shit. I'm sitting in it. I'm swimming in it. But I'm comfortable here. So I can have a Peter Rubin or a Nancy Moricette provide me with resources and access tools to pull me out of this species, you know, take a shower, you know, and look at where I was and go, I want to be there again. What tools do I need? Racial equity tools, cultural equity tools do I need to implement in my life so I don't go back to that shit place?
Yeah. There's so much you said that I want to highlight. You know, one is that it reminds me of Ibram Kendi's ideas, which I'm learning about more, that it's less about labeling someone a racist or not a racist. Those fixed identities are so not helpful. And labeling the good and bad, but it really depends on the day, depends on the moment, depends on the ideas and concepts we're sharing. That friend I mentioned is actually an amazing turnaround story. I had that conversation and go, oh shit, what am I going to do with this friendship? And then a couple of weeks later, we talked earlier this week and we had an amazing conversation.
And it
he was open-minded. He was talking about intersectionality.
There you go.
You know, I was stretching him, but his foundation was there. And like, what happened? What happened? Compassion.
Yeah, an opportunity. And let's not get it twisted. Like, part of the reason why I use the practice of Ase is it's very important to name racism. It's important to name homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia, and to be specific. Because if we don't name it, this is also for me, if I don't name my demon, then I can't claim my demon. And then my demon is then free to claim and name me. So that means if I don't name racism, right, for myself, for Nancy Moricette, then the spirit of that is going to be all up in my space, you know? And it doesn't matter how I do the work that I do as an anti-bias facilitator and strategist, right? This is still going to be here. So I'm going to be highly ineffective in how I do this work because I don't believe in what I'm doing. Now, within naming it, there is hope after racism. There is hope after xenophobia, meaning if I label Peter's friend as a racist because these are actions that this person has identified for themselves and I've identified them in how they're choosing to show up in the world, I also have to, I always say hope is active. I also have to be activated in how I connect with that person if I choose to, so it's not have to, how I connect with that person to see if there is hope for our friendship, to see if there is hope for their growth in the space that we're in. And if there's not, then I leave them to their practice. It's not for me to uproot that for them.
That's so important to know. And I think for me as a white man, there's a higher bar. Like it's my job to stay in there with my white friends who are stuck in a way that is not your job. Right. And I find myself in that role, you know, reasonably often. And I can relate because I've been on this journey for 8 years, you know, and I've stepped in a lot of my own shit. I found my way out of it and I don't need to be perfect to be helpful.
There you go.
Right.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
I would encourage you to lean into the practice of, I hear the word job a lot. It's my job to do this. Think about what a job is, right? It's something you go to 9 to 5. Listen, I'm the word lady. Words have power. So you be careful about the spirit of words you welcome into your space. But it's something you do in order, it's a transactional relationship. What I encourage people to lean into is the practice of commitments, because that's more transformational, right? So how do I transform this practice for myself and others, you know? So what am I committed to? And what I'm committed to today can transform. It might change tomorrow. I remember I quite like, I don't agree with everything he does, but I quite like Barack Obama as a leader, and former President Barack Obama as a leader. And I remember when he first got into office his first term, he was pro-civil unions and not gay marriage, if everyone recalls, because people also have selective memory about their multicultural Black identified hero, Barack Obama. But he was not pro-marriage. equality, civil unions at the time. And I remember thinking to myself, I see what he's doing. This is also part of his religious practice. This is also part of his bipartisan practice, because if he comes out strong with yes, gay marriage, he's going to lose both houses. Okay, so this is a chess move, chess not checker move. Okay, but it still hurt. It still hurt me, and I was like, okay, so I need to investigate what his commitments are, because his job is to be commander in chief. But let me stay in this space and see what he's committed to in the long term. And sure enough, second term came around and some shifting started happening, some serious cultural shifting. Well, first term leading into second term, and then we saw, thank God, the Marriage Equality Act pass. And he said, if you interview him, he said he had to evolve in his thinking. If you interview him, if you've seen interviews with him,
Wow.
he said he had to evolve in his thinking around gay marriage. And that's important, because this is a person acknowledging where they were, you know, in order to be clear about where they're going, where they are currently, and about where they're going.
Yeah, I do miss him, and and that humility, right?
You listen.
That humility is so important in a leader, to admit that we're all working on wrong assumptions, and our thinking is evolving all the time, as it should.
I stopped missing. Real talk, I like Michelle Obama better than Rock, because she's like my for real, real life Storm. If you're into X-Men, I love comic books. She's my Storm.
Yeah.
She can change the weather. She can make it rain. But I personally practice not saying I miss this person or that person. I just look in a mirror, because I'm like, I am that person, you know? John Lewis, you know, people are like, oh, we lost John Lewis. We lost John Lewis. John Lewis is still here. Spirit of John Lewis is still here. The work that John Lewis accomplished is still active. Giant amongst humans. And someone was having a conversation with Ava DuVernay, and I think it was Stephen Colbert, and because John Lewis was a consultant on Selma. And the person asked Ava DuVernay, what was the greatest thing that John Lewis ever said to you? And she said, you know, I kept saying to myself, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And John Lewis said, do everything. And she was like, it's just so simple, but everything, Peter, that you feel like you've been called to do in this life, do it. Don't think about it, do it. Be activated in your purpose. You know, so when we're talking about activated, not just white allies, but accomplices, thank you. I'm glad that you're reading these books by Double Kwame Bell, or my favorite writer, Bell Hooks. Ooh, y'all should read, Right Rage, or just the list goes on. Thank you for reading those books. Now be activated in it. I don't love the word accomplice because it sounds criminal, but I need you to co-conspire with me. That also sounds criminal, but to deconstruct, destruct these systems of oppression that have for hundreds of years kept a person looking like me away from, distant from all the things that I can access to provide me with true equality in this country. You know, be activated in that space. Do everything that you could possibly do. Do it. Don't talk to John Lewis. Don't talk to me about what I can do. Do it.
That's such a powerful call to action. I'm in for that.
Yay!
Yeah, because it's so easy to get in paralysis, or you know, sort of our self-imposed limitations.
Yeah, real talk.
And I'll share for me personally. You know, I do various things professionally. This racial healing work is part of it. I do work with men's work. I do conscious business coaching. And during this pandemic, I thought I had to choose between them. And now that I'm leaning into doing these racial justice workshops, I have men coming out of nowhere and saying, I want to work with you. I'm a yes. I'm having more success with my men's work, putting about 20% as much effort as I was before.
Yes, it is. You better
because
speak,
I'm saying
Peter.
yes to everything my soul is saying to do.
Oh, you better speak. That's exactly what it is. You're calling it into, you know what? I'm not a big law of, what is it called? Law of attraction. Yeah. I'm not with it. What I am with is another definition of Ase is the spirit of creation that lies in everything, right?
Beautiful.
Yeah, so when you are really focusing on naming, right, and being clear with that naming, those spirits will come to you. The spirit of creation will be drawn to you. The spirit of um, confirmation. Oh, I'm affirmed and confirmed in this thing. I doubt it. You know, I don't know if I can operate these two. And then that confirmation will come through. Yes, you can, Peter. Let me show how you're gonna do this. It'll just come through. You know, you just takes sitting in space and allowing those blessings to come forth. You know. Mm.
So good. So let's talk about from moment to movement, moving from
Yes.
moment to movement, and I know you do a lot of organizational work, and a
Yeah.
lot of organizations are asking, how. I guess I'm curious. I think some organizations are just wanting to check the box of diversity.
That's right.
I know some diversity trainings don't work at all, and there's a lot
That's
of
right.
research saying that certain types of trainings don't work. And then some trainings do work, and some trainings actually, or some approaches can actually work for the long haul.
That's right.
And I know you focus on doing strategic work. So could you step into that world with us and explain what doesn't work and what does in organizations?
Gladly. I'm looking at my phone because I have a meeting with our organization in 30 minutes. So
Okay.
but I'm ready. I
We'll
know
wrap before then, for sure.
I schedule. Yeah, I know. We schedule time for this. But okay, so what has been identified through just surveys, and Harvard Business Review came out with a great article. You can Google it on why diversity programs fail, and what typically happens is this thing called checkbox diversity, right? So we usually operate in two zones when it comes to racial equity or cultural equity work, right? The one zone is push. So we saw this happen with post-civil rights era and affirmative action, all this stuff. So organizations are being pushed to foster certain racial equity initiatives because there's now a federal mandate, right? So we can have our one Black person or one Asian person or one BIPOC community member. So they're being pushed into this area. The other one is pull. So all the research that's coming out now is saying that I'm not going to say the number, but a large portion of our population in this country will be Latinx, and a large portion of our working population will be millennial. And millennials disproportionately care, thank you, about equitable action issues, so around racial equity and cultural equity. You hear me mention that a lot. They really invest in these issues. So now organizations are forecasting and going, we need to have certain initiatives within our organizations to keep these younger employees invested within our organizations because they're holding us accountable. Thank you, right? They're holding us accountable. And what they have is something called, I may not love social media, but I acknowledge that it's a wonderful tool when used well. They have social power, so that collective bargaining chip, that collective power. So you can take down a company like the Redskins. You could take down a company like Aunt Jemima. You can take them down because your buying power, that collective power is going, no, in a big way. So now these big companies who for years, social equity warriors like myself have been going through traditional routes, education, and trying to pass certain bills and initiatives, have been trying these different methods, weren't working. Whereas, I would say this is kind of a good part of cancel culture. I am not a big fan of cancel culture either, but the good part of it is that collective bargaining power, which is do this or else. And that's working. So what I do is I help organizations identify and then strategize on how to live kind of in between that space between push and pull. So we know what doesn't work. We know that you bringing in what we saw with Starbucks in Philadelphia, Howard Schultz, shutting down all of the Starbucks for 3-hour diversity training for all of his employees because 2 Black men were wrongfully arrested at a Starbucks because they were having a business meeting in Philadelphia. That didn't work. It created a media blitz. It created great press for them. Whoever their turnover specialist was, their spin specialist, was doing a good job there and saying, look at us, we care about diversity. But in the long term, it didn't disrupt the how many BIPOC members are in executive leadership at Starbucks? How many people from the queer community with specific focus on trans and non-binary folk are in executive leadership positions? How often are you out and starting collaborative projects with communities that are under-resourced, that don't always have access to the resources that Starbucks corporation offers? How often are you doing that? That didn't happen. That long-term sustainable disruptive change didn't happen. So what I often recommend people do is, there's a great resource, a study that was put out in 2018 by BCG Global Initiatives. And I'm just gonna read a couple of them for you.
Great.
There are 3 communities that they focused on specifically, and these 3 communities that were surveyed came up with these actionable items that are the most impactful and effective. So one of them is to show a viable path towards disruption within organizations, is to have flexible work programs, right? No brainer, but yeah, if we're seeing it happen now, it happened anyway because COVID-19 forced us to do it, right? But whereas before we're like, oh, we can't do that. We need to follow this old model that came from the 1950s that everyone has to be here from 9 to 5. And no, I don't care if you're a single mother, you know, and you know, but flexible work programs, parental leave for not just the traditional male-female employees, but if you have a man that's married to a man, a woman that's married to a woman, you know, they both should be able to take parental leave, right? Appropriate healthcare, same thing with, does that healthcare acknowledge members of the LGBTQ plus community as partnerships, you know? And then childcare, I'm dealing with a client like this. This particular client works at an organization, works for an organization that offers wraparound services to communities that are impacted by, that are under-resourced economically and tend to be from Latinx and Black and Brown communities. And because she works for organizations, she can't access those resources. And that doesn't make sense, you know, like how can you get further marginalized by a company that's supposedly supposed to be helping you, a single mom who is of the African diaspora, but because you work here, it's a conflict of interest? That doesn't work for me. So that's something we're working towards eradicating at that company. So for employees of color, blind screening, this is a big one, right? So when we're talking about moving from moment to movement, okay, it's great that you say that you're committed to disrupting social injustice, racial injustice at your company. Great. How are you going to do that? Let me give you a specific action item. The next commitment to hiring you have, there are a lot of orchestras that do this right now. They were hiring way too many orchestral agencies tend to be very misogynistic. So particularly when it comes to horn sections. So they literally have a blind and the person plays behind the blind. So I can't see your color or your gender identity. I can't see it. I can just hear your music, right? So then you get hired based on that. So how that works for job applications is you submit job applications, you take off the name, and you just look at who's on that application.
Because, you know, that research is classic that if you have a black sounding name, your chance of getting the interview is a lot less. This is, I just want to jump in and say, these are all so pragmatic. You know, when I think about DEI work in organizations, I think about touchy-feely workshops.
Yeah.
And I hope there's value in that too, because I love
there
that.
There is. You combine the both. You're supposed to combine the both.
That makes a lot of sense to me, just intuitively, that you need both. And that's why we're talking about systemic racism rather than just the racism of ideologies and mean things people say.
That's right.
You need to address the policy and systems issues at every level.
That's exactly right.
In teams, in, you know, politically.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I want to mention the last one for LGBTQ members, which is representation. So like, and not just representation, but showing how you're publicly aligning with this community group. So if you, let's say I am from AIG and I say, yeah, I'm all for Black trans rights. Okay, great. Sponsor the next Black trans rights event that's happening in your community and show up there. Ask the community how you can be a resource to them, okay? and show up. Have it be a company partnership, right? That's real investment in a public way. But what often happens is, oh, I'm invested in secret, I donated, $50,000, right? Because from the corporate perspective, it's like, I don't want to disrupt any connections I have with my board members, but that's not actual advocacy.
Yeah.
That's performative activism. So that's what we're all, so when we're talking about going through the movement, this movement is a collective, y'all. There are people like, oh, I don't know what to do. You have to be willing to lean in and explore some of these actionable items that have worked for other companies, and then learning how to repeat that either within your own individual lives, how can you show up in a solid way, or within your organizations.
And hire Nancy.
Hire me.
DEI expert, right? You don't need to do that alone.
Yeah, I say the word strategist. I don't think anyone's an expert, even though I work for a company one of the companies I work for is called Expert Effects. And I was like, I'm a strategist. I've been doing this for a long time. And I incorporate empathy-driven work. I incorporate accountability. And I match that with what I call accountability benchmarks. So the empathy portion is, I know that sympathy just leaves me in a non-activated space. But when I'm learning how to really listen to what Peter is telling me about his cultural identity, about his experiences, learning how to take that listening and incorporate it into the tapestry that is my cultural network, that's something, right? Yeah. Okay, so I provide the framework to do that as organizations. Then that last item is super important. Who's going to hold you accountable and how? Every major company has a strategic plan, and I can guarantee you they're held accountable for achieving the benchmarks on that timeline. And when they don't, there is hell to pay. So there has to be hell to pay for, wait a minute, we said that we would have these blind screenings accomplished by November 2020, and they're not accomplished. That's a problem. Yeah. Okay? That's a problem.
A few things. One, I never mentioned how we met. So I'm in a program for white folks. It's an embodied anti-racist program. And Nancy, you're one of the co-facilitators.
Yeah.
And I just want to say that fire that you bring, the hell to pay, is one of the things that I appreciated. Yeah. Your bright smile, your fierceness, your wit, your warmth, all of that. So it's been a joy just to get to know you in different spaces here, to get a sense of what you're like in the organizational setting.
Thanks,
and how you bring it.
Thanks, Peter. So, yeah, I'm not really a facilitator. Ethan asked me to be a collaborator on this white accountability cohort that he's leading. And part of the reason why I've heard people use the word facilitator, because we're going to talk about this in our next meeting on Thursday, Peter. When you're working with in alliance with people who are from a marginalized community, we want to be very careful of tokenization, and it can happen easily. So one of the things we're going to frame for this group that Peter's in on Thursday is how to do that. And you'd be surprised. It really just comes from constantly checking in with that person, and know that what stands as what's the word I'm looking for? Stands as appropriate for Nancy Moricette doesn't necessarily stand as appropriate for other Black identified women in this country. It's just what it is for me.
Thank you for that. So 2 more things. One is, how can people get in touch with you around consulting or questions that came up around this? You're not on Facebook, which is amazing.
I'm not on Facebook. I'm on a website. So my website is www.asepowerconsult.com. It's easy. And Ase, it's just spelled A-S as in Sam E, powerconsult.com. And then I have a LinkedIn. You can look me up on LinkedIn. And that's it.
Great. And for folks who are interested in Free Yourself First, the workshop that I'm co-leading soon, that is at racialhealing.net.
Yes.
So if you're white and want to keep diving in, this is a space to do it.
Can I mention one action item if you all are local to Los Angeles that people can
Please.
commit to? So a very good friend of mine, she's actually one of the policy lawyers from my consulting firm. Her name is Rashida Kilpatrick Esquire. She's a lawyer for Al Sharpton's National Action Network. She led a march, y'all, on City Hall last week, and it was well attended. But the premise of this march is what I'm talking about, literally, from movement to action. It's not enough to just protest. You have to hold your local council members accountable for passing bills at a local level, then representing bills on a federal level that disrupt social inequities in the long term. And you can look up this organization. It's National Action Network. But the particular bill that she marched to, that got media coverage, so you can look it up, was called A March for Police Accountability Legislation. And this particular legislation that was presented was for having mandatory independent prosecutors for officer level death cases, mandatory independent investigator for independent, same thing, it's repeated. Ban the use of the chokehold. That's, if you're looking for the specific bill, it's support AB 1196. So you can contact your local Congress members right now and do that. Then there should be a limit to officers' qualified immunity. So although you missed that march, what you can do now is, if you want to find who your local California representative is, literally, y'all, the website is so easy. You just go to findyourrep.legislator.ca if you're in California,
Great.
or just Google Find Your Rep. This doesn't take a lot, y'all. Just Google it, call up this rep and say, hey, there are these 3 things I heard Miss Nancy Moricette talk about. What are you doing about it? That's it.
So anyone in California can check that out.
NT1, actually NT1 anywhere, because you can still support this initiative even if you're not in California.
Great. Awesome. Anything else before we close?
Listen, I want to say thank you, Peter, for fostering a space like this. And to everyone that's out there, shit is hard. Yeah, there's a triple trauma going on right now. We have COVID-19. We have a racial reckoning in the streets, and we have an economic downturn, you know? It's hard. So I want to name that demon, but listen, it doesn't have to claim us. So please, I encourage you to go into the, sit in the practice of practicing love of self, so that you can then really learn and model for others how you want to be loved, how you should be loved, and how to love others. Because this is hard, you know? It's hard, okay? It doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means it's hard. So go ahead and name that and work through it with each other.
Thank you, Nancy. That's such medicine. Thank you for your love and your truth and all the insight and adjustments you offered me. I got some good learning here. So thank you for being here and your time.
You're welcome, Peter.
Thanks you all for tuning in. I'll be on the Facebook thread if you have questions, and I can chat with Nancy and post stuff as well. So
bye, invisible people that I can't see. Bye.
Bye, Facebook.
Bye, Peter.
And then let's stay on for one.